No one wants to manage databases if they can avoid it. That's why MongoDB made MongoDB Atlas, a global cloud database service that runs on AWS, GCP, and Azure. You can deploy a fully managed MongoDB database in minutes with just a few clicks or a few API calls. MongoDB Atlas automates deployment, automates updates, handles scaling, and more so that you can focus on your application instead of taking care of your database. You can get started free at mongodb.com/atlas. Now, if you're already managing a MongoDB deployment, Atlas has a live migration service, so you can migrate it easily with minimal downtime and then get back to what matters. Stop managing your database and start using MongoDB Atlas. Hi, this is Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hanselminutes. And today I'm talking with Kate Redding. She's an engineering manager at Asana. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you, Scott?
Enjoying the pandemic at all. Honestly, looking forward to podcasts and talking to amazing people every week is a highlight. Do you have any great highlights in your pandemic week?
I mean, other than us setting a pizza box on fire in the kitchen last night, I'm not sure what could surpass that right now.
That sounds amazing, but only if it was intentional. You had to intentionally burn the pizza box in your house.
Sadly, we lost a great half of a pepperoni and sausage pizza, so I would have planned it differently if I was doing it on purpose.
Well, we the Hanselminutes audience collectively mourn that half of the pizza. I was checking out the Asana blog when you wrote an article called "Why I Joined," and whenever I have people on the show, I look at the dates, and I always try to figure out the timeline. How long were you at Asana, or have you been at Asana before you became a remote worker against your will?
So I joined Asana in January of 2019. And so that means a little bit over a year before we went remote.
Was it all quick? Was it like Monday you're at the office and Tuesday they're like, go, go, go?
I don't even remember, because what I really remember is that I had taken a week of vacation. And so I was on the East Coast for a wedding when San Francisco went on lockdown. So what happened for me is that I was out of the office when the office made all those decisions. And so my life was about deciding, am I going back to San Francisco or not? And we rented a car and drove cross country to Missouri, and I lived there for 3 months. And I just flew last week from Missouri to Florida to switch from staying with my husband's parents to staying with my parents. So my world I haven't been in San Francisco for 4 months.
Yikes. So the house or the apartment or whatever is in the state that it was when you left and was not expected to
Yes.
Did you leave an iron going?
I did ask a friend to go and empty my trash and see what was in the fridge. It turned out I had left the back door unlocked, so we got that taken care of. But yeah, it was a bit of a shift from what I expected.
Okay. Well, this is actually really interesting because you went to both your husband's parents and your parents. Now, my wife and my parents, respectively, don't exactly have amazing home internet. And I have been seeing quite a diversity of home internet as I've watching people struggle with their, high definition Teams and Zoom calls. Has that been an issue at all? The infrastructure of the parents?
There have been pluses and minuses, I would say. So my husband's family lives in Missouri in a very small town. We were worried about the internet, but actually it worked out fine because he and I were both doing Zoom calls. The thing that was very interesting is they have a cabin in the middle of nowhere that they like to go to on the weekends. And there's no internet and my phone doesn't work. And so I try very hard not to work on, I try very hard not to work on the weekend anyway. But I'm used to sort of having this fallback of what if I need to check in on something, or if I have a candidate I'm trying to hire and they need something from me, there needs to be some approval. I'm off by time zones for a couple of hours. I'm used to having a little bit of a fallback. And instead, I've just now made it very clear, hey, on the weekends, I am going out of internet range. So if you need anything from me, get it to me by noon on Friday. And it's been very healthy.
Wouldn't you say that it would have been healthy pre-pandemic?
Well, listen, I'm going to take this as a learning opportunity. But also
That is true.
I hadn't worked from home, and so it was much easier to draw boundaries when my work was at work and my home was at home.
That is really interesting. So I've worked remotely for Microsoft now for 14 years, and I have found the opposite. And I've heard people say the opposite is that you're in your house, and if you're kind of trapped, and of course that's a juxtaposition between remote work as a joy and a freeing thing, and quarantine work as an oppressive, glorious prison with Netflix. But the idea that I don't really have anything else to do, and I'm in this spare bedroom, and I go outside, and I'm on the same Wi-Fi network. People find themselves working always, like their work is just smeared across their personal lives. It's awesome that you are able to keep those things separate.
I mean, some of it is survival, and some of it is setting an example. For one thing, I'm also a parent. So I have a 3-year-old daughter. And that's a big reason why we decided not to go back to San Francisco and instead to stay with family for a few months, because it just gave us a lot more flexibility. But it means that I don't have hard lines within my workday, and I don't have hard lines at the end of my workday. Right before I came in to record this podcast, my daughter wanted to show me how she made the bed, and she really wanted me to come in and play with her. And I had to be like, no, I have something I have to do. And so that happens my whole day. So by the time I'm finished with work for the day, if I can really draw a line and say I'm finished, I need to, because there's more things I have to do.
See, first, I feel like we need to immediately stop the show and see this bed.
It's a thing of beauty.
I feel like there's an accomplishment in the other room, and we are missing out on that. I very much appreciate that the 12-year-old will come in here and be like, "Hey, can you look at this Minecraft thing that I built?" And it's like, "Oh, you got to talk to a vice president or whatever." They don't know that my boss's boss's boss needs to talk to me, and then they go, "That's okay. I guess I'll see you after work." It's just like, oh, you're ripping my heart out. Like, I don't want to work. I'd love to. I like my job. That's the other thing, explaining to a child, I like my job, but I don't want to work. I want to hang out with you.
Right. And it's sort of both all the time, right? I like my job and I love being a parent. It's just I can't do them both at the exact moment all the time.
The other thing that I like that you said, and I read a double meaning into it, is you said you're setting an example. And I'm curious if that is setting an example for your team as well.
Yes. As I've been thinking about how I support my team, one of the things that I've been talking with them about is I created this thing that I wrote up early on in the pandemic. And I said, it's my comms plan for this work from home time and my priorities. And I listed my top priority is health and safety of my family. And then my second priority is health and safety of the people on my team. And then third is health and, healthy functioning of the team. And then fourth is execution. And so if I'm not setting that example, or I'm saying I'm turning off the internet, or I'm having a hard day, or Emma, my daughter, is having a rough day, and so I need to take the space to take care of that, how am I then going to tell the rest of my team that it's safe for them to do the same thing?
That is really important. And what I like about hearing people's priorities is I like it when they don't fit an obvious order, or I go, oh, that's how you ordered them? My wife and I have told the boys that the marriage is number one priority and the boys are second. Mm-hmm. And the boys are like so offended by that. What? I was like, well, you guys, we were here before you and we will be here after you. Don't let the door hit you on the butt on the way out. Right. So like without a healthy marriage, so what you're talking about is execution fourth, what? But at the same time, that makes total sense. And that sets the tone for the whole family, for the whole personal life and the professional life. And hopefully your team takes that to heart as well when it comes to taking time off and setting boundaries with you.
Right. I find it's especially important for my engineering team leads. So that's the hands-on people who are writing code who are leading the team is they feel a real sense of responsibility. The team depends on me. If I'm not doing those things, the work isn't going to be ready for them. And I describe it as the classic, you have to put your oxygen mask on first. If you don't take care of you, how can you take care of anything else? And it's the same for me in my role.
Mm-hmm. And I know that is one of the primary goals, your primary job functions as the engineering manager is to coach those team leads on what's an effective process, what's an effective culture. But how are you doing that on the fly? You said that you hadn't been, did I understand that you have no remote working experience before? Do you read? Do you ask other people who've worked remotely, or do you just figure it out intuitively?
So my teams were kind of interesting. On one of my teams, I had one remote employee. So one person who has always been remote, and then the rest of the team was all in the office. So from that, there are definitely some practices that we got in place to make sure that he could work effectively as a member of the team. And I think that probably gave us a leg up. But everyone going remote really changes things a lot. I think there's a fair amount of it that is, we relied on some practices we already had in place that were good, and then we had to double down and make them better. And maybe the top thing is iteration. I honestly don't read as much as I used to, and I think it's especially because I can't create the space for in my life for it right now. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of it is tips and tricks from other people who are in my network, just kind of very quick. We're doing a lot of, here's a thing I've done that works. And I'm like, great, I'm just going to take yours and try it and then iterate on it. That's been maybe one of the fastest ways.
Yeah. That is smart, though. Like, fail fast, fail often. If you think about, I'm just kind of like listening to how you're absorbing and how you're processing information. You set formal priorities on your life. There's a lot of people who just let their lives happen by default. You ranked the things that were important to you, and now you're describing a personal culture and a team culture of, fail fast, fail often. Hey, let's try this for a week. Did that work? We feel good about that? All right, let's try it again for another week. No, we didn't like that. Let's not do that anymore.
Yeah, I would say the practice that has helped the most, I think there's two things. One, on my team, I've established a culture of doing team user manuals. It's adapted from, I can't remember who it was who did a thing on manager readmes, but that was where I got the idea. And it's essentially an operating manual to working with me, but from the perspective of recognizing how different everyone on the team is and giving everyone a space to answer a few questions about how they work and how they function. And we were doing that before because I just find it really important for building a diverse team that makes space for each other. But now it's become even more important. And we had an opportunity right around the time where we all ended up work from home. We had Roadmap Week, which is our organization's planning moment. And there's two parts to Roadmap Week. One part is outward facing to stakeholders. Here's what we're going to build over the next 6 months. Here's our expectations for what will happen in what order. But there's also an inward facing moment where the team retrospects on the last 6 months and just explores what went well about how we worked together, what didn't go well, what new practices do we want to introduce, what practices do we want to modify. And it's a very big reflective moment. And we happened to have that shortly after we all went work from home. And that turned out to be a really good intention setting moment.
I like that term, intention setting moment. I'm getting really big this year into deliberate practice. And it doesn't matter if you decide to do a thing and it's wrong or right, but it is important that you decided to do a thing as opposed to letting the thing happen. So intention setting sounds very intentional.
Right. That's exactly the point behind why I think these user manuals are so helpful as well. Because otherwise, a team's practices, maybe they're formed intentionally by a couple of the leaders, but ideally, I want them to be formed intentionally by the team because we're ultimately asking the whole team to buy into them. And so if we give everyone in the team the opportunity to weigh in and create those intentions together, then it's more likely to both stick and to support everyone.
Mm. I'm going to put links to all of this stuff that we're talking about in the show notes, the manager readmes, the idea of a user manual. Having a personal user manual, that's been coming up more and more on our teams at Microsoft, where someone says, oh, I want all of my communication in Microsoft Teams. And then you have a person who says, well, I want all mine in Outlook.
Right.
And then it's like, well, and then some random person like, I want it in WhatsApp.
Right.
And it's, so what do you do in situations like, do you have any situations like that where you're a Slack company and everyone wants it in Slack or whatever, but no one wants to do that?
Yeah. I mean, I think, so my view on this is that writing the user manual isn't the thing that means that people disagree. It's the thing that surfaces it. So we had a bit of a showdown on my team about how we were going to do stand-ups. And it was, there's a faction that wanted to do synchronous stand-ups in person via Zoom, and there's a faction that wanted to do asynchronous stand-ups via Slack. And
asynchronous stand-ups?
Right. Meaning they happen. Yes. And it's another point too, right? So meaning they happen sort of whenever is the right time for you, right? So it's sort of an individual focus versus a team focused moment, right? Okay. Yeah. And there's lots of reasons for all these different things, right? Time zones can come into play. Should stand up be first thing in the morning? Well, first thing in the morning for me isn't first thing in the morning for you. What about right before lunch? Well, my whole family has scheduled lunch at this time. And now you're saying you want to do stand up in this time. So what's the right thing? And the bottom line is, your best case scenario is you find a solution where everyone is happy. But let's be real. Sometimes that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so we ultimately, we made a compromise. And this is when I like my team to try to be able to reach a conclusion on their own. Ultimately, in this is one where I did something that's unusual for me. And I decreed what it was going to be. And I said, I want us to do this for 2 weeks, I think was the initial time period. I said, for 2 weeks, we're going to do it this way. And I don't want us to talk about it. I don't want to hear about it again. I want us to focus on the rest of our work, and you can think about it. And I encourage you to be open-minded about the perspective that was different from yours. And then I created an explicit space. I said, at our next retro, I'm going to create like an explicit space to talk about how did the stand-ups go.
That is really actually very cool, because we use a term and sometimes internally, I need a volunteer. If I don't get a volunteer, you're going to get voluntold.
Right.
But the opportunity there, like you gave them the space to come up with a solution. That failed. You said, all right, we're going to do this. And then at Intel, they have this term, disagree and commit, right? Yeah, the big old fight, everyone's mad. Okay, we've committed though. For 2 weeks, I love that, a moratorium on not complaining about this. We'll complain about it later. We have things to do. Interesting. Is there pressure to use only Asana for these things, or to make the tools fit the process, or the process fit the tool?
I would say that the benefit that we get from having the whole company use Asana is that we're pretty clear on it being the source of truth, and all teams use it. So it makes it easier to collaborate across lots and lots of teams. So that becomes the trade-off that we make if we choose to use another tool. But for things like stand-up, right now, you think about what's the problem you're trying to solve. If you're trying to do a synchronous stand-up where everyone is together in the same place and try to quickly share information that's not long-lived, Asana isn't the place, because right now it just doesn't solve that need. We use Asana for tracking the source of truth. So if you think about the team's work for a sprint, it lives in Asana. And so any long-lived information should be there, but you're quick, how am I feeling about it?
Right. Asana is the North Star. It's the source, like you said, the authoritative source. This is what we're doing, but it's not a chat platform.
Right.
Hey, friends, I want to thank one of our sponsors, the company Text Control. They're the creator of TX Text Control. It's a Microsoft Word-inspired document editor library. It's basically a document processing engine for your web applications. They've got libraries for ASP.NET MVC, for Angular, for Node.js, and they just released a .NET Core version. It lets you basically integrate a WYSIWYG document editor into your web applications. You can edit docs, you can do merge templates, you can include data, you can even create Adobe PDF documents with a fully featured API. It's really pretty amazing. You can try it free, and I encourage you to check out the live demos at textcontrol.com. textcontrol.com/demos. textcontrol.com/demos. It's really a pretty amazing piece of work. One of the things that we've been trying on my team is a thing called Monday Vision, Friday Reflection, where on Monday we send out an email, which is a bulleted list, and one of our team members does it with emoji. So now we all do it with emojis for bullets, and the emojis now have meaning. And that is a vision for our week. And the trick wasn't to be a complete list of all things we're doing. It was meant to be 3 to 5 things that we would really feel an awesome week would require. If the week was awesome, we got these things done. And then on Friday, we reflect on them and we do like a little mini postmortem. That's an asynchronous stand-up, but we do synchronous stand-ups. If that makes sense. You know, we're on Teams, we're doing video calls, but everyone tells everyone what they're doing. And that the intent of that was we're struggling with cross-team collaboration because we're ending up being siloed because we are physically siloed. Has that happened at all? It's like, well, I'm here, I'm in my house, in my time zone. I'll just do it all. I'll just do the thing.
Becoming siloed from other teams or becoming siloed individuals?
Siloed from each other. I have a team of 10 and no one is co-located. We're all remote. And there are opportunities for team synergy where like, oh, team member 2 and team member 6, if only you two knew what you were working on and you were in the same room, you could do this, or, you know, so we're really struggling with that. And one of the things we're trying to incorporate now in an attempt to fix this is what one of our team members calls writing it down culture. Just stop talking and then spend more time writing things down. So, hey, this hour meeting, let's make it a half an hour meeting, and then somebody write it down and put it in one single place.
Yeah. I don't have perfect vision. So for me to say, oh, no, we definitely are absolutely collaborating in all situations where we should, I can't say that because certainly there's something I don't know about. I think the fact that we use Asana for all of our different types of information really means that we had built a strong practice of writing things down before. We use it for meeting agendas. We use it for tracking our sprint work. We use it for, here's my list of ideas that I want to eventually apply to this problem we already know about. We have lots of sort of built-in mechanisms and practices already for that. It doesn't mean we're perfect at writing it all down, but I think that's not the particular problem we have. I do see siloing happening. I think actually the place I see it the most is with new people who are onboarding because they don't know where the people are or where the information is unless they know what to search for or someone tells them about the thing.
Yes, that is a huge problem.
And so
discovery
is really hard because if you know the words to search for, you can find the thing. Like we have this set of projects that is intended for you to give input to something that you're not responsible for. So for example, as an individual engineer, if you have input about how a recruiting process or a hiring process or interview process goes, you submit it to the Eng Interview Opportunity Project. Once you've been at Asana for a little while, you know that if you search for opportunity, you'll find product opportunities, Asana opportunities, interview opportunities. And so you'll quickly find the place where you can provide the feedback you wanted to provide. But if you don't know that opportunity is the word that we use for talking about that sort of thing, or that that's a cultural thing that we value, how will you find that for the first time?
Exactly. During our onboarding process, we have a glossary of words to know. It's all of the, all the Microsoft isms that we don't know that we don't know. Do you have a similar kind of Asana isms, terms and things that are not industry standard but are Asana standard?
Certainly. I mean, there's lots of them that we've explicitly written down, things like our company's values, which we make sure and we train everyone on that, and then they show up in lots of places. But there's also many that are, could be team specific or a part of your area. Or also there's some that over time you get so used to that the moment that you realize that it's not common is when someone questions you on it.
Yeah, exactly. I do before, I don't want to run out of time, and I want to shift gears a little bit because I was looking at the timeline of your career, and I noticed that you worked at Apple for a time in software engineering, and I just happened to notice that you you left Apple in August of 2001.
Mm-hmm.
As I recall, that was a busy time in America just shortly thereafter.
Right. Yeah. When I worked at Apple was actually my internship before my senior year in undergrad. And so the career fair for my senior year, when everyone was looking for jobs, happened in October 2001. So the key event that happened in between that was September 11th. And my career fair was not very well attended for multiple reasons. One was that the tech sector really hadn't been doing well for a little while. That was around the time the bubble popped. And then recruiters were literally afraid to get on planes to come and recruit. No one wanted to fly in October 2001. So that year, actually, there's some similarities to things that are happening to undergrads now where people who did get job offers early in the year were having them rescinded before they graduated. And it was a really tough time in the job market. So I ended up, there were lots of people I graduated with who went back to grad school, but I was pretty burned out on education at that point. And that's how I ended up working for the federal government, because when lots of tech companies weren't hiring, they were.
There's a huge chunk of time where you spend working, it just says for the federal government, doing awesome and amazing things, but that's for 13 years. And when you work for the government, can you log in podcast and talk about that stuff? Or do you literally disappear, do awesome work, and then your head pops up 13 years later?
Definitely disappear, and then your head pops up 13 years later. I had no professional presence until I decided I wanted to leave the government and look for a job elsewhere.
How is there any, when you come out of, when you exit, for lack of a better word, a mission like that, a 13-year stint, is it hard for people in the private sector to see value in that, in the black box, the new black box of your career?
Very, very hard for a couple of reasons. I mean, some of it honestly comes from bias, because people say, well, if you haven't worked at a startup before, how do I know you can work at a startup? People have their own perspectives on what does it mean if you worked at a government? What does it mean about you, or about your background or your capabilities? But also, I spoke a different language. I had spent 13 years getting really good at understanding when someone asked me a question, what information they were really trying to get out of me, and knowing the words to communicate it. And when I first started looking for jobs, people didn't understand me and I didn't understand them. And so it was a real effort to figure out how to communicate in a way that I could explain why it is that I know I can do this work, even if you don't see Google on my resume or Microsoft.
That is really interesting. I have a good friend who is a vet and came out of doing engineering and software in the Marines, and he also felt when he jumped into the private sector that the language that they're using, like, they're not clear at all. They're not telling me what they need. This is not in any way organized. What's wrong with you people? It's a complete, like, when you said another language, I was like, what? French? No, you were speaking government.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And there's San Francisco tech language, and people don't know what it is because they all use it. But when you come from the outside of it, you immediately are like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. And it's things like acronyms, but it's also things like just shared culture. I mean, I have a soft spot when I find people who are leaving the government and are looking to switch to tech. I enjoy talking with them to help them understand how to translate their experience in a way, because you have to be able to speak the other person's language. They may not be as motivated to learn to speak yours.
Well, and isn't that the very personality type and the skill set of a successful engineering manager?
Yeah, I think, it's an interesting point to be able to speak other languages. I think so. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way.
My 14-year-old has started telling people that humans are just big meat bags under pressure. And I'm like, okay, that's an interesting way to think about humanity itself. We're just walking meat bags. Thank you for that gift, young person. And as I'm trying to understand how he thinks about things, how he is developing his worldview, I start realizing that as I try to support my team of meat bags, I've got 10 different people, and all different backgrounds, all different, they all grew up differently. They all developed their brains differently. it's a miracle we get along at all. And my job is to herd those cats and make them happy and successful in their best selves.
Yeah. And I think I've heard this, you find comfort with people who are like you and growth with people who are different. And I think as an engineering manager, I've absolutely found that to be true, because when I find someone who has had similar experiences to me, it's easier for me to coach them and also for them to relate to me, because I can say, oh, yes, I've experienced this, or this is a struggle that I had, and here's how I worked through it. And they get to sort of feel less alone and also see an example of someone who has successfully worked through that. But when there's someone who's very different from me, I have to work harder to make sure I'm really understanding where they're coming from and how to coach them in a way that will be helpful to them. I don't want to be coaching. It's that like do unto others as they would like, as opposed to doing what I would like. If I coach someone who's very different from me with the way I want to be coached, it might not work.
Interesting. That I really like that. And I think that's a good place to end, though, because it really gets you thinking about how we are in the place we are in technology with inclusion, where an industry found comfort in people who went to the same schools and hung out with the same people. And now we are experiencing a moment of growth where we can find both comfort and growth with a whole new generation of people who think differently, and hopefully will make better software.
I like that.
Thank you so much for chatting with me today, Kate Redding from Asana.
Thank you.
This has been another episode of Hanselminutes, and we'll see you again next week.